All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Robin Berzin is the founder and CEO of Parsley Health, America's largest holistic health provider for women with chronic conditions. She founded Parsley Health to address the rising tide of chronic disease in America through personalized holistic medicine that puts lifestyle, proactive diagnostic testing, and food first on the prescription pad next to medications. Parsley is available nationwide via telemedicine and has beautiful centers for in-person care in New York and LA. Dr. Berzin attended medical school at Columbia University and trained in internal medicine at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. This January, Robin is releasing her new book, State Change, with an easy-to-understand advice and detailed personalized assessments. State Change is an ultimate getaway to a positive mental state and peak physical health. Dr. Berzin, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited. You had your pub date yesterday for your new book, State Change: End Anxiety, Beat Burnout, and Ignite a New Baseline of Energy and Flow. It's such a departure from our last conversation about what we can all do to be healthy, whether that's what we eat, what we drink, how we take care of ourselves, the doctors we see, the functional MDs we see like you. But this goes into the emotional piece. So many of us, especially coming out of the pandemic, are dealing with a state of burnout and anxiety that is just unparalleled. And you're giving people the resources. So thank you for being here, and thank you for writing this book. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to see you again. I was just thinking back to when we last spoke and we did our last podcast, and it was like deep in phase 1 of COVID. And I remember sitting there with my computer in my lap and talking to you, and still like it all felt super unreal. And I remember thinking, at the time I was doing a lot of interviews because it was really early days on the disease itself. And you and I were talking about functional medicine and root cause and nutrition and how we can heal our bodies inside out and put ourselves, at least in some ways, in better stead to face the disease. And I just remember afterwards telling our team, I was like, God, that was such a refreshing conversation, because it was such like dark days, but we were talking about the things that were like why I got into medicine in the first place. So anyway, it's awesome to be back here as in the time of what we hope is the final hour of this pandemic. We'll see.
I know, my fingers are crossed. I know that,
yes.
Our family had Omicron, and it feels like our neighbors have it right now. It feels like it is obviously super contagious, but not as stressful on the body, and giving people a dose of natural immunity. And hopefully it'll just become a thing that we can all handle every year and get over.
that is the hope. Let that be the outcome of where we are at this moment. And I hope I'm here with you a year from now having another conversation. And we're like, and that's what we're saying. So just putting it out into the universe.
It is. And you know, what's interesting is it's perfect timing to have this conversation about your new book, State Change, because what has happened for so many people over the last 2 years is that they had to take on a lot. They had to homeschool their kids. They had to work from home. They had to be the caregivers, the chefs, the maids, you name it. Like, I mean, we had to handle a lot. We had a lot on our plate, and it feels like now more than ever, so many people have this state of anxiety and depression and stress and burnout, and you're seeing it in your patients and in your practice. So what has been your experience with your community and the patients that you work with that inspired you to write this book?
I think we had these issues before. And I think that everything that's been added to our plates in COVID, as you just said, revealed an underlying anxiety and depression and chronic fatigue that was really there. And so what I've seen over and over again in my practice, and what I saw even before COVID, was that people would come to us at Parsley with physical issues, digestive issues, hormone imbalances, infertility, metabolic issues they were trying to fix through this more, a proactive approach to medicine that we offer. And yet over and over again, the diagnosis code, the ICD-10 code that we were adding to our medical charts was anxiety, was depression, was fatigue. And the other thing I saw was that by addressing these underlying physical conditions, we were often simultaneously able to heal some of the mental health issues. And so I felt compelled as we started out the pandemic, when it was clear that mental health was going to be the other pandemic going alongside of the COVID pandemic, I felt compelled to write down the methodology for addressing the physical barriers to our mental health, because there's only so much you can do in the situation we've all been in, but there are concrete things that you can do to heal your body that will have a massive impact on your mind. And so I wanted to give people that roadmap.
And you do that in your book. You have the 5 core actions that have the biggest effect on our mind and mood. And I'd love to unpack those on today's podcast. So I'll let you run through them with us.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we cover at the very beginning the blood tests and the chronic conditions that I think a lot of people don't realize we have. And you talk about this a lot in the talks you do on metabolic health and in all the work that you do. 60% of American adults have a diagnosed chronic condition, 40% have 2. Tens of millions more don't know that they have it. And our blood sugar, our thyroid hormones, our nutrient deficiencies, all things that we can look at through really simple tests, could be the reason that you're feeling depressed, exhausted, anxious. And yet in our medical system, we aren't designed to connect those dots. And so one of the first things we cover in the book is, what are those underlying conditions and how do you know if you have them? And what are the simple blood tests that anybody can take, even to a regular doctor, even just in a one-shot, relatively cheap or covered by your most basic insurance, blood test that can be really transformative. And I really want to connect the dots for people there, because a lot of times their doctors aren't. Most doctors see mental health as not their department if they're not a psychiatrist. And we know that we have wait times of months to see a psychiatrist. Not everybody has access to a therapist, and therapists aren't capable of running tests and diagnosing you. So if you're hitting a wall out there with your mental health, the answer could be in your body. And so let's start there. Let's get some testing and let's understand. I had a patient who came to me who had been feeling, what we call FLC syndrome, feel like crap syndrome, gaining weight, tired, dry skin, constipated, bloated. Her doctor had prescribed an antidepressant and just told her, this is what it was. And at the end of the day, no one had done an in-depth look at her thyroid, and we diagnosed at Parsley hypothyroidism. That was the reason she had all of those symptoms. Just by treating her thyroid, not only did she get off of her antidepressant, her digestion cleared up, she lost weight, and she was a new person. And so, in her particular case, not all the antidepressants in the world were going to address her problem. So before I'm going to get to core actions.
No, this is great.
But I just want to first make sure we cover that unlock for people, because something like 70% of people under 65 or millennials don't have a primary care doctor.
No, they see their
Not,
OBGYN once a year and they get a pap smear and they leave.
right. And your GYN is not a primary care doctor. Your GYN is a wonderful, wonderful, amazing, critical doctor and a part of your healthcare. A GYN is not a primary care doctor. They are not looking at your hormones. They are not looking at your heart health and your blood sugar and your nutrient levels. Vitamin D deficiency can mask as depression, right? And in a 15-minute visit, which is mostly a pap smear and your blood pressure taken and a breast exam, or if you're seeing your PCP, a 15-minute visit that's a very cursory physical exam and a couple basic tests, no one is connecting the dots between your mental health and your physical health. So we need to look deeper. And you may have to be the person who says, hey, I want these tests run. And in the book, you can literally open up to the page and show your doctor the tests. I'm not just like in high level. I'm listing TSH, free T4, free T3, vitamin D3, right? Like, what are the tests that you need? Take this page, show it to your doctor and get these tests, because we need to first address what's happening inside that we can't see before blaming ourselves for how we're feeling.
Absolutely. And I think it's freeing for clients and, in your case, patients, that there is something under the hood that isn't going right, these underlying conditions. You mentioned thyroid, blood sugar, vitamin D. What are the biggest things you're looking for in regards to blood sugar? You mentioned TSH for thyroid. What are the biggest culprits of mental anxiety or depression?
So blood sugar is a big one, and glucose is not enough. Hemoglobin A1C, which is a 3-month look back, is not enough. And I'm talking about real metabolic syndrome diabetes, where people have chronically elevated blood sugar. I'm not talking about, I eat super healthy and I'm active, and once in a while I have something that spikes my blood sugar, but really chronic undiagnosed issues. So this is fasting insulin, fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C. I know you're a big fan of continuous glucose monitors, and they can be really useful in a number of conditions. But you can just start with those basic tests that I just listed, which are a one-shot, and get a ton of information. Blood sugar, if it's chronically elevated, it can lead to brain inflammation, and brain inflammation is associated with anxiety and depression. So that's one. We also look at autoimmune markers and measures of inflammation. If your body is inflamed, your brain is inflamed. And if you have chronic global inflammation, you're not able to use the serotonin that you have. Your brain and cognitive function are not at their ultimate. And so it's really important to understand if you have an underlying autoimmune or inflammatory condition. And so we'll look at things like hsCRP, ESR, just as a starting point. And then if you have other symptoms of immune dysfunction, we may test more broadly for that as a second step. Another one is thyroid, huge. And we talk about all the sex hormones and their relationship to mood. We talk about testosterone, progesterone, but something like 1 in 5 to 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with a thyroid condition in her lifetime. Most of them low thyroid function here in the US. And there's different flavors and varieties of thyroid function, and a TSH is not enough. We want free T4, free T3. We also want those thyroid antibodies that tell us if you have an underlying autoimmune thyroid disorder that hasn't yet gotten so bad that it's bumping your TSH up. And so that's why this more proactive approach to testing is so important, because if you have one of these things going on, it could explain how you feel. And it may be that, again, if you have Hashimoto's or just general hypothyroidism, an antidepressant isn't going to help you if that's the cause of your depression. Doesn't mean antidepressants are bad or not valuable. But when we look at the research, for instance, they only improve anxiety and depression somewhere between 40 and 60% of the time. So what's happening in the other 50%, right? And so that's where these tests can be illustrative. Nutrient sufficiency is everything from low iron to vitamin D3, B vitamins. A lot of people aren't getting enough B vitamins or aren't getting the right types of B vitamins. And so all of these things can contribute to underlying issues that are driving how you feel physically every day. And so when we identify them, the good news is a lot of times we can do something about them. And maybe it's not the whole answer to depression and anxiety, but it could be a huge part of it. It could get you into a place where you feel even more equipped to be able to deal with your depression and anxiety.
One thing that you said in your book, that it's not a realistic goal to never be anxious. And I just want to thank you for saying that, because I think people assume that if they have symptoms of anxiety or depression or burnout, and they're trying to get to this perfect place where that just doesn't exist, it's an unattainable goal that's going to give them more anxiety. So can you explore what normal states of anxiety are and what we should expect, and what are some realistic goals we can start to set?
Absolutely. We are a setup for sickness. We are set up for these emotions. In modern life, we are sitting 11 hours a day. We are eating highly refined, high sugar diets. 70+% of our diets in America are ultra refined carbohydrates and sugars. We are spending hours and hours on hours a day looking at screens, which we talk about in the book of how that inhibits optimal cognitive function, not to mention some of the negative implications of some of the social and newsfeed platforms, which we'll talk about. And so through all of this, we are going to feel anxious or depressed or tired. You are going to feel that way. It is part of the way that we are living our lives. If we don't move, we look at screens, we eat a highly refined diet, we're using other tools that are not so helpful all the time, like alcohol, to manage some of these emotions. It's a compounding effect. And so we need to accept and normalize some of these feelings. And then to that end, say, all right, I'm going to have these feelings. So what can I do every day to have my own state change, which is about elevating my baseline of energy and calm and clarity and focus and positivity? Because this is not something you can set and forget. Like, I hate to break it to you, but or to any of us, but this is part of the way that we're living. So therefore, we need tools in our tool basket every single day that are accretive, are improving our mental health rather than depleting it. But we're not, you and I were talking before we started, we're not as a culture or as a society taught these tools that are additive to our mental and physical health. Instead, we're kind of taught the opposite. So right now, I think we're in what I would refer to as a great unlearning.
Definitely. I mean, I can even see it in like the parenting research that's coming out for kids, like naming the feeling. So they even have the vocabulary for it. So they can start to understand and express emotion and explain how they're feeling. Like, these were things I have the most loving, amazing parents, but they didn't sit me down and say, what feeling are you feeling right now? And help me understand what those feelings are, so they can feel foreign to us when we're thrown into a work environment and the stresses of having a family and finances, and throw a pandemic on top of that. And of course, we're going to feel this way, but we may not even have the vocabulary to name it, understand it, and then move through it. So how do we get started? I know we have your 5 core actions, and I want people to understand how to use those, but you also talk about baseline a lot. Like, how do we understand what our baseline is and if it's healthy?
I don't know about you, but I can't remember what I had for lunch last Tuesday. Can you remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday? No, of course. And you're like a mom like me. So you're like, it's a miracle I got up today and I'm on this, right? So knowing that, it's impossible for us to remember how we felt a month ago or 2 weeks ago. What was our level of bloating? What was our level of anxiety? What were we even anxious about? Did we have a headache, right? This is not information that we're sort of set up as humans to easily track. And so one of the things that we have in the book is something that we developed at Parsley Health and have now clinically validated in the medical literature, which is called the Parsley symptom, which is the fancy name for our symptom score. But we walk you through it in the book, so you can do it on paper. You can also go to parsleyhealth.com/insights and do it online and get a score. But it allows you to give yourself a number. Are my symptoms high? Are my symptoms low? Across 9 body domains, including mental health, gut health, hormone health, musculoskeletal health. And that can be something that you do every couple of weeks that you can start to track, and you can give a guide. What is my baseline? Am I really symptomatic all the time and just kind of waking up tomorrow and hoping and praying that I feel better? Or am I only symptomatic at certain times of the month? Is my anxiety really linked to my PMS and my menstrual cycle? So we need to address this from a hormone perspective. Are my gut health and my gut symptoms like bloating and gas and constipation and reflux tied to when I also have a mental health issue? And maybe there's a correlation, or we know there's a correlation between your microbiome, the bugs that live in your gut all over you, but big population of them in your gut, and mental health. 95% of the serotonin in your body is actually in your gut. So when you get that baseline and you do the score every couple of weeks, it takes like 2 minutes. It's a scientifically validated way of tracking because we can't remember how we felt 2 weeks ago. I cannot tell you, Kelly, I'm like grabbing my hair. I can't tell you how many patients come into Parsley and we see them like once or twice over the first like few months and we're working together because health happens over time. Health doesn't happen in an instant.
Yeah.
And they'll come in with all these symptoms. They'll put on their symptom score and all these things. And like 4 months later, they're better from like 80%. And they come in and they're like, you know what, now I'm really worried about like my weight gain. And I'm like, well, what about the migraines and the bloating and the irregular periods and the acne that you came in here with 4 months ago? And they're like, oh yeah, forgot about that.
Yeah.
I'm like, even the things that are so present for us today can quickly fade into the background. And so, you know, it's hard to know where you're going if you don't take a beat to assess where you're starting from. And so that's what the score is all about.
No, I love it. I love that it's scientifically validated. It's funny because when I read this book, when you sent it over to me, I was so impressed with it because any other time that you've gone to a physician, it's normally just the pain scale. And that's what they have at the hospital. And that's what they have at your doctor's office, where it goes from like a smiley face to a very upset face. And I think there are 10 different little faces and you can kind of just like point to the one that it is, but that's it. It's like, if you don't have physical pain in your body, then there's actually no way for us to assess how you're feeling. And it makes you feel crazy as a patient to not have a way to track these things. And it really does depend on how you slept the night before sometimes and how you've been feeding yourself to how you feel, how resilient you feel that day and what you're really able to, you know, how you feel. So having something that's repeatable and the same questions every time really kind of, you do the work for us, which I love. So I'll make sure and link that assessment and the book to the show notes, but such a great tool for people to track how they feel, because you're exactly right. And sometimes some people are so attached, like you said, someone coming in, I want to talk about my weight gain now, so attached to the scale or their weight, or if their main problem is bloating, feeling like they have weight, that it's not looking at them. They're not looking at themselves as a whole being. It's just this one metric.
Yes.
So how do we get people out of that state and start?
Yeah. I mean, we need holistic medicine, right? Like, you know, obviously that's my soapbox in life here. I've decided for
I love your soapbox.
Sometimes I'm like, whoa, how did I get here? But, you know, I saw in my medical training that we were in these 15-minute visits only looking at one metric or one or two basic metrics, missing the whole picture. And that in most of the conditions we face today, they are conditions that develop over years, if not decades, that are affecting all parts of our body. And your migraines might be from a magnesium deficiency, and mine might be from chronic stress, and somebody else's might be a hormone imbalance. So we can give you a medication like a sumatriptan for the migraine to manage the pain, but we also have to ask, why are you having migraines and what's causing them if we ever want to get past them? And so for that, we need a little bit more time. We need to see you over time. We need a little bit more testing. And we need to take a beat to look at the whole person. And then to take us to our core actions, we can't assume that the solution is another pill. A pill may be deeply valuable for managing our symptoms, or in some cases cure if it's something simple like a sinus infection or a UTI. Medications are deeply valuable tools. I prescribe them all the time. Our doctors at Parsley prescribe them all the time, but they're not enough. And so we have to expand our prescription pad. And so when I talk about the core actions in the book, which are the foods that you're eating every day, how you move, your relationship with technology, sleep, and then your relationship with alcohol and other substances that you might be using to manage your emotional state. Typically, these things are not habits. Like, I think medicine's done us a disservice by like writing off nutrition as like a habit. Like what you eat, biting your nails is a habit. What you put in your mouth 3 or more times a day is not a habit. It is a defining life action. And so when we wrote the book, I was like, we are not using the word habit. One time I was like, I am calling this a core action. Because it is core and vital to who you are and how you feel, not just 20 years from now, but right now and tomorrow. And so the first one is nutrition. And I know, this is a core part of your work as well. The foods you eat every day are massively defining how you feel. And refined sugars, refined carbohydrates, and omega-6 fats, which are the vegetable oils that are making up the majority of what most people are eating on a daily basis, are making us sick. And they're not only impacting our metabolic health and our weight level, they're impacting our mental health. And like I said earlier, it's driving up brain inflammation, which is associated with anxiety and depression. It's feeding certain bacteria in our gut, which are responsible for modulating the neurotransmitters that help dictate our mental health. It's triggering our immune systems to be chronically always on, which is leading to some of that inflammation I talked about. So food isn't like medicine. Food is medicine. And so I walk through in the book what the specific foods to try and the specific foods to take out are over a 30-day plan to begin to understand how foods are impacting your mental health and your emotional well-being.
Can we go there? I know I want people to buy the book, but you so methodically chose things to remove and things to really focus on adding. And I'd love to give people a little insight into some of the science-backed recommendations you have.
Yeah. So simple, start out, eliminate refined sugars, gluten, and dairy for a month. And those three things are not bad, but they may be bad for you. And so it's an experiment, and this book, by the way, is not about dieting. I don't talk about weight loss once. This isn't about looking fab or fit. I do not care about those things. The book is about mental and emotional well-being and how foods could be impacting that. And then we walk you through how to do that elimination protocol and how to reintroduce those foods to see how they make you feel. And I've seen patient after patient after patient, and we have now data on tens of thousands of patients at Parsley for whom this has been really instrumental. Because if you're sensitive to these foods, allergic to these foods, or they're causing a blood sugar issue, it could be driving your brain fog, your headaches, your fatigue, your bloating, which is in turn causing brain fog and poor cognitive function. And so we talked about how to take those things out. And then all is not lost. I do say in the book, if cheese is your life raft, we have bigger problems. Like if you can't go without cheese, like, okay, but well, let's talk about that, right? Like I love cheese as much as the next person, but like, let's just put it in a box for a beat. Yeah. And then, let's reintroduce those foods and see how they work for you. And in the meantime, let's eat lean and high quality proteins, seafood, get our omega-3s from fish like herring and wild salmon. Let's get it from our walnuts and eating on a lot more olive oil and nuts and seeds. Let's cook our food. If you make 2 out of 3 meals a day, you are like more than half the battle, because most of the foods that are making us feel this way are processed and packaged convenience foods. And so you don't have to be grain-free. I'm a carb lover. It's not draconian. So you can have quinoa, you can have rice, you can have root vegetables, you can have carbs, but balancing them with protein and healthy fat and recognizing all the things on your plate as something that you could imagine, like in a children's book, being on the farm, like the actual zucchini, right? Like as a mom, how much time do you spend reading your child books about farm animals and animals that don't live here typically except in a zoo? Like I'm just like, the fixation of children's books on these animals is amazing, but cool. We all know what the farm looks like, even if you don't live on one, if you're a mom. So let's try to recognize, did this come from a cow? Did this come from a plant? Is this a grain we could recognize? And eating that way, you can eat out. You can eat at a variety of places. You don't have to, batch cook all your meals for the rest of your life. But you do have to recognize your foods you're eating. And people describe feeling like a light bulb went on in their brains when they cut out the refined foods and the omega-6 fats, and they add in the foods that I list in the book.
No, I love it. And highlighting the omega-6 fats, I think they're just so omnipresent in packaged foods, from like hummus to dressings to the foods that you're the foods that what they're being fried at the restaurants. So like you said, having a goal for 2 meals a day to just think about the majority of your meals being made at home and how much better you'll feel. And having the goal of doing it for a month really does allow people the time to recognize, to do that assessment prior, to do it for a month and to assess themselves again to see how did their state change? Because a lot of times, I don't know if you've seen this, I'm sure you've seen this in your practice, people aren't giving it enough runway to see what that change might feel like. It's 1 to 2 days, 3 days, and then quote unquote falling off the wagon, or, they're having a hard time sticking to their commitments. So yeah, how can people...
I think we can empower ourselves by moving from shoulds to feeling good. Because I think for women, especially, the last thing we need is another should.
Yeah.
Comes with guilt and shame, most of which, let's be honest, is tied to our physical appearance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not helping us in a world where we're the chief medical officers of our homes, of our communities. We are making the health and well-being decisions for ourselves, our partners, our parents, our kids, often our friends and colleagues, everyone around us. And so if we are going to have to do that job, then, and this goes for a lot of people too, not just women, but the data shows that it's largely women, we need to equip ourselves with feeling good. And a couple days of eating this way, as you pointed out, isn't going to cut it, because the inflammation and the fog and the reset happens over weeks. So it's not months, it's not years, but it's weeks. And we need to give our bodies that time to heal, to really feel that state change. But the difference can be absolutely dramatic. And then when you go back to eating that way, you do feel it and you notice. And that's empowering too. And it's not that you're never going to have, a junky or fast food meal again in your whole life. You can, but you'll be in control because you'll know how that food makes you feel.
Right. You're connecting to a deeper why, which is exactly what you said. It's not the physical appearance that the world tells us to pay attention to. It's the energy you have for your family, to show up, to be the CMO of your community, especially the people living under your roof. But then to notice that difference, it's connecting you to, wow, this is actually making an actual difference in my life to eat this way, to make these decisions. And that, I think, everyone listening to the podcast would want more energy, more vitality, to feel better in their body. And nutrition plays such a big role. As you mentioned, it's a core action, not a habit. You have to take responsibility for it and handle it.
Yeah. And to your point about, two quick things. To your point about the omega-6 oils, I'll just note that they create inflammation in the body and are disrupt your body's ability to use serotonin, which is one of those feel-good neurotransmitters. So that's part of the why. They're also not so good for your heart or your immune system and a bunch of other things. Those are our vegetable oils, our canola oils, our rapeseed oils, our grapeseed oils. They're used in like fried foods, packaged foods, often salad bars, because olive oil and higher quality oils are more expensive. And so, but if you're buying your own and you're cooking your own, that's, to your point, the way to avoid those. And, for anyone who is looking to experience the state change through those few weeks of changing up how they're eating, and they may say, well, listen, I have a history of trauma, or I have a family history of anxiety or depression, and like eating healthy for a few weeks, or even being really explicit about what I'm eating for a few weeks isn't going to cut it. To that, I just want to say, wherever you're starting from, whether you have a history of trauma, you have a family history of mental health issues, you've dealt with this your whole life, or you're dealing with it just in the recent context of the pandemic, wherever you fall on that spectrum, trying to manage that emotional state without addressing what you're eating every day, this core action, is like trying to climb Everest without getting to base camp. You're just not going to get there. And so this is a program and a protocol for helping us address the things that are in our control, because that family history of that trauma, we can't change. And we don't control this pandemic, as we have clearly all experienced as a globe. But there are certain things we can control that'll help us feel better and will make the things that we're facing every day easier to manage.
Beautiful. Amen. These are core actions. These are foundational things to get you to base camp so that you can climb Everest. So we talked about food. The next core action is movement. Does this mean that everybody needs to do Barry's boot camp every day?
No, I would keel over if that was the case. I'm also not a gym person, as anyone who knows me knows. Whenever I go and they're like, well, the last time you were here was 67 days ago. I'm always like, score.
Yeah.
What do I win for being least regular gym goer?
Yeah.
But the thing we have to recognize is that our bodies were designed to process emotion through movement. Our bodies were designed to process emotions through movement. And so when we sit looking at screens 11 hours a day, we are not processing our emotions. And that is leading to disease, dysfunction, and a worsening emotional and mental state, period. And so we should, as a medical community, be prescribing exercise because the data on exercise for mental health is clear and has been long established. In studies, 95% of people get better in terms of their anxiety and depressive symptoms through exercise. And as I mentioned earlier, only somewhere between 40 and 60% improve with antidepressants. Again, it doesn't mean an antidepressant can't be a vital tool for you. But we as a medical community have to do better because we should, based on the literature, be prescribing movement and exercise to every single person with a mental health issue, but we're not. And so it goes back to, this is not a habit. This is not a nice to have. This is how our bodies were designed. When you have a thought, you have an immediate, automatic, emotional reaction to that thought. It could be like, I'm talking to Kelly right now and she's so amazing and I'm super nervous to have this interview and I'm crazy jet lagged and didn't sleep well last night because my hotel was really loud and like, am I making sense? Whatever. I could have that thought. I might not even perceive that thought. It's not like I'm reading a billboard. It just happens. And then I have an emotional reaction to that thought. And emotions are not in our heads. They happen in our bodies. So what we trigger is an emotional cascade, which is a neurohormonal cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones that washes through our whole body, touches every single cell. Every one of our cells has receptors for these neurotransmitters and hormones. And that neurohormonal cascade can last up to 2 days before it fully clears.
Wow.
And if this is happening over and over and over again all freaking day because you're stressed about work and the email and the kids and the parents and the pandemic and the news or whatever it is, your body is awash in these very natural, in small doses, useful chemicals, but in constant waves, unuseful chemicals. And this leads to dysfunction of our metabolism and blood sugar, impairment of our immune system, so we're not as able to fight COVID or anything else that we're dealing with or heal from injury, and can ultimately create dysfunction and inflammation that can lead to disease. So when people say emotions are stored in the body, what I just outlined is the science behind that. And again, it's not all in our heads. So exercise is a proven way to process that emotional weight and to release it. And so in the book, we talk about, what you can do for 20 minutes a day. And I really recommend a mix of cardio for the cardiovascular health and blood flow and endorphins with strength training, which is positive for not just insulin sensitivity, but also long-term cognitive function, really good for brain blood flow and creating plasticity in the brain. And then yoga and movements that like Tai Chi and Qigong, which a lot of people say, well, that's not Barry's boot camp. That's not going to make me fit and hot. But I would
yes, it will.
It will make you supple and present and calm and glowing and train your brain to have awareness of proprioception through the brainstem of the body in space. And I don't know about you, but after a long day, I'm not up for a HIIT workout a lot of the time. But at night at 9 p.m., which is usually when I do any form of exercise these days with the kids, kids plus work, that is a combination that keeps me moving every day. So I do process that emotional energy, which again, the science shows creates a long-term benefit for our mental health.
It's a core action that when you just explained that our neurotransmitters and hormones can wash over every cell in our body and last for potentially 2 days, that just moving our body could help us process all of this and combat that state. I think everyone, we don't want to feel what we felt 2 days ago and have that emotional state, especially if it was stressful or traumatic. I think we all just think we're resilient and we're going to brush our shoulders off and move along. But what you're saying is that it sits with us for potentially days.
Yeah. And then over time that creates dysfunction that can even last years, right? And people wiser than me have written books like The Body Keeps the Score and other books that really delve into the science. And what I cover is just the sort of roadmap for how you can start to move every day in a way that feels attainable. Because I think if we feel like we have to exercise for an hour and go sprint down the road, it's too intimidating. It's too intimidating for me. But, I know how I feel when I'm doing a light yoga practice or just a little bit of resistance training at home with my resistance bands and my medicine balls and my little stuff. It's not fancy. It's not expensive. But it's critical. And our lives today often aren't set up for this to happen. And when we start get in that phase of I'm just feeling crummy and down and my outlook's negative and my, depression I've dealt with for years now suddenly feels insurmountable. When we look at these core actions, we give ourselves things that we can do right now to feel a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And that little bit and little bit starts to accumulate in this state change.
No, I love it. And thank you for being honest about when you move your body, because I think people assume if they can't lock it in the perfect morning routine, that it's a wash. And the majority of us who have kids are dipping back into computer work or work late at night. And we know that that's not great. It's a horrible relationship with tech. It's messing with our sleep. These are two other core actions that you have. So I'd love to know how you stack that movement at 9 p.m. with a relationship with tech and sleep so that you can get the benefits, but so it also works for your life.
Yeah. I have no morning routine. My morning routine is wake up and deal with whoever is crying first. So I have a 4-month-old, a 2-year-old, and a 5-year-old. So someone is crying and that's all I have to figure out and take it from there. So for me, if anything happens at night, and so to kind of bundle sleep and tech together, technology is problematic for our brains in 2 ways. It's depleting the gray matter. Mobile device addiction is real. We are addicted to our devices because they're designed to be addictive. And then there's the self-esteem and FOMO impacts of the social platforms and the sort of constant fear cycle of the news platforms. And so, I had a patient who came and had longstanding anxiety, and she and her psychiatrist were co-managing that for her. She was in her 20s. She was having a major anxiety flare and literally wasn't sleeping, had a young kid, this was not going to work. And she was one of those non-responders to medication. So her psychiatrist was I don't know what to do because we've tried all the drugs and they're not working for her. And so I said with her, I'm let's go back to the basics. What are you eating? What are you doing every day? Walk me through. And during the pandemic, she had become uber addicted, if that's a word, technical term, not a scientific term.
Yeah.
Use it anyway, to her phone and to news feeds and social media, and was spending 6 hours in aggregate a day when she looked at the apps and added it up. And she decided to do a 1-week social news feed, app log out and deletion and quote unquote detox. Not my favorite word, but that's what she called it. So I'll use it. And she started sleeping again. And she wasn't that, she was never going to have anxiety again, but her anxiety went from completely unmanageable, lying awake all night, every night, starting to lose her mind, exhausted all day, to sleeping again. And so it felt so good. She continued it for a month and now does this at least 1 week out of every month, because she found that her relationship with these devices was so depleting to her mental health. And so tech and sleep, therefore, deeply related. Your relationship technology might be why you're not sleeping that well. Highly recommend a screen-free hour before bed, at least 30 minutes, but ideally an hour. It's not just the blue light people who are sitting there saying, I'm wearing my blue light blocking glasses and I have all my filters on my screens. And I'm sorry, hate to break it to you. That's not all it is. Yes, the blue light disrupts melatonin production, but it's actually just a stimulation from the content, whether it's TV or phone or computer or whatever else. So giving yourself that time taking phone calls during the day as opposed to always looking at a screen if you're someone like me who has a lot of video calls in their lives, and going to bed earlier, trying to be in bed by 10 p.m. because getting to bed earlier allows you to go through enough 3 to 4 full sleep cycles, which gives your brain time to do its work at night. When you're asleep, your brain's actually washing itself and cleaning out some of the metabolic trash that it's produced just through existing and firing off, neurotransmitters all day. It's not broken. It's just making sort of waste, and it needs to clean up. And so that's what it does at night. And so if you can regulate your relationship with tech, get to bed earlier, prioritize sleep, these things can make a huge difference. And for a lot of people, sleep deprivation, which is not just about total hours, but actually sleep quality, can mask as depression.
I mean, it's been eye-opening for me just to be able to track my sleep and to see how much more deep sleep and REM sleep I get going to bed in the before 10 versus before 11. I mean, it's astronomical. The score is up 10 points on Oura Ring, which you can do that without having the Oura Ring. You know the difference of going to bed before it's too late, especially as a mom I'm the same as you. I'm waking up at somewhere between the 5 and 6 o'clock hour to someone crying for me, or yelling for me nowadays, my name. So that makes a huge difference. The fifth core action you have is around substances, which there has been a groundswell of sober curious people, and I'm loving it. I haven't seen a doctor address it as an issue for someone's state like you have so eloquently. So can we talk about how substances can interfere with our state?
Yeah. Alcohol is one of those ones that I think has been treated in a very binary way by our medical community, where you're either dealing with alcohol addiction, and it's a highly addictive substance that is a very real medical condition for a number of people, not the majority of people, luckily, but a percentage of our population. And for those people, there's no healthy amount, right? And that's one area that we have to think about with alcohol. But there's also alcohol abuse, and there's alcohol use disorder, which is where we are using alcohol in a way that is negatively impacting our lives, even though we're not addicted to it. And so there's a lot of gray, and it's not one or the other. It's not alcohol is okay until it's completely destroyed your life. There's a big area in the middle. Alcohol is dehydrating. It disrupts deep sleep, which we just talked about the implications for that on mental health. It is a blood sugar destabilizer. So the day after you drink, your blood sugar is more unstable, and you're more likely to eat maybe not the best foods as you're trying to kind of get energy from that sugar. It's a natural depressant. So alcohol makes us depressed. And so we just have to recognize that, because we live in a culture that has decided that alcohol is sort of part of socialization for a lot of people, a huge percentage of our population. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't recognize its impact on how we feel every day. So I ask everyone in the book, we have a 30-day plan that's like our Kickstarter plan, and then we have the advanced plan. If you're like, I'm already there, I want to go take it to the limit. So I'll give you both options. But for me, just as a physician, as a mom, the Kickstarter plan is where I start. And I recommend limiting alcohol to 3 days a week. If you are able to have a non-addictive relationship with alcohol, limit it to 3 days a week so that you have more days of the week where you're off than on. Giving your body a chance to recover, giving yourself more healthy nights of sleep than not, and being really mindful not to drink too late, too close to sleep, because it is such a sleep disruptor, and just noticing how it makes you feel and whether your mental state is better the day after alcohol or not. Because I think we've been socialized to use alcohol and other substances as our remedy for our emotional state and our mental well-being. And I wanted to call out in the book that is often actually really at odds with our goals, but it's been so normalized. And I think we have to talk about it.
Definitely. So if someone's already keeping it to 3 days a week, what is your advanced plan recommendations?
Oh, nada, zip zero, 30 days, and try that for yourself. And listen, I know it's hard. I know that so many people say, well, I'm going to a wedding and I have this social event or I have this work event, or, unwinding with my glass of wine is something I really look forward to. And so I write about in the book, okay, cool. If it is that socialization for you, or if you're looking to unwind, let's just find some other things to do, because our option is not like drink a glass of wine or just stay wound up and freak out. That's a very there's not two options, there's infinite options. So for me, doing yoga at night is a way to unwind, or getting on the phone with one of my girlfriends, which, it's like back to high school for me, because we don't get to see each other the same. And I know I like to talk to one of my girlfriends at night when our kids are asleep and catch up. And that's a beautiful unwind. Or doing, an outdoor or indoor, if you're okay now with COVID, like workout date, or doing something social, just going for a long walk. We can replace as opposed to deprive.
I love that. I love replacing instead of removing. It's a total mindset shift that feels productive versus having to control or, like you said, deprive. So many amazing tools in your new book, State Change. I'm so excited for your book tour. I'm so excited for people to get their hands on this book. I will put links to everything in the show notes, but I'm curious, from your standpoint as a physician, as really a leader in the functional medicine space, making functional medicine accessible to so many people across the nation through Parsley Health, what do you think the future is for our medical community evolving to understand that all of these core actions are a huge part in creating wellness?
I wish I had a less nerdy answer, but it's data. And I say that because, so we have some really exciting things happening at Parsley, and we have absolutely incredible, unparalleled anywhere else in healthcare outcomes data now that's been independently verified by third parties, looking at insurance claims data, as well as our own data, showing that we're reducing prescription drug burden by 30%. We're reducing the need for specialists for people who have autoimmune, GI issues, cardiometabolic health issues, hormone and fertility issues. We're reducing the need for seeing specialists and outpatient procedures anywhere from 50 to 77%. So we're saving 2 to 3 times, sometimes infinitely more than that, but on average, 2 to 3 times our annual membership fee in reducing all of these other medical needs, because we're helping people heal. And so at Parsley, we are a nationwide online medical practice. We also have locations in New York and LA, but we're available nationwide online, and we're combining functional medicine with conventional primary care so that you kind of get the best of both, you get the best of both worlds in one place. You're not sort of choosing. And our protocols are really now showing just this absolutely tremendous impact on health. And that's enabling us to do things like we're starting to go and network with insurance companies. We're doing some interesting work with companies. So if you're listening and you want your company to offer Parsley Health, be in touch, call us up, because we're doing that now too. And I say all that because I think we've been waiting for a healthcare system to catch up with us, with all of us, with anyone listening to this, with you and the amazing work that you do for ever. And it's so frustrating that it hasn't happened. Medicine can be slow to change, and some of that's about safety and not wanting to be too quick with things. We need that side of it. That's a good thing. But we also need it to evolve for the state of where we are as a society, as a country. And so data, like the data sets that we're producing, help validate indisputably that this holistic approach to health, which combines nutrition, mental health, lifestyle, things like core actions like movement and sleep, with medications, with procedures, and bringing it all together is a more effective way of offering medical care than any other way. And I think as the world wakes up to that, you're just going to see more and more of medical services, not just the wellness world, which, I love our wellness world, but actual doctors, actual medicine adopting this. And so I think it's coming, and I think it's really exciting.
It is really exciting. You're definitely an earlier adopter than most, but it's the extra work of pulling together those data sets that's going to get people on board. And so thank you so much for your work, for pounding the pavement for hiring other doctors and bringing them under the Parsley umbrella to make this really accessible to everyone. If Parsley isn't accessible to you, grab the book State Change. Do it no matter what. Dr. Robin Berzin goes through all of the markers you should be looking for. And if the only person you see is your gyno, bring the markers that you want to have called. Try to identify these underlying conditions that can really have an impact on your mental state and take control and change your state. Thank you so much for writing this book, for giving us a simple list of core actions. I think people sometimes go like, what tincture and potion can I add to feel better? But it's like, we don't need to be the grandmas here, but let's just go back to the basics.
Yeah. We're not like teasing out like with tweezers here, like you can have this lentil, green lentil, but not this red lentil. So like, don't worry. Like this is a very achievable plan.
No, it was really refreshing because this is the basics. Like you said, they're core actions. Thank you, Dr. Berzin, for being here. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge in your awesome new book, State Change. If you guys are tuning in, jump on your Amazon app, head to a Barnes & Noble, head to a local bookstore, grab this book. It's going to change your life and your state.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Where can people follow along?
ParsleyHealth.com/state change. If you're looking for the book, we also have lots of cool other information there. You can follow us at Parsley Health and me at Robin Berzin MD on all the socials, although delete your apps for a week. But then when you come back, follow us at Parsley Health and at Robin Berzin MD. And yeah, ParsleyHealth.com/state change. And if you want to get your own and more, we have some cool at-home tests coming out. You can go to parsleyhealth.com/insights if you want to start tracking yourself there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Berzin.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.